So, upon losing and getting back my YouTube channel, I made the video where I got my channel back, and I decided not to change anything about the direction that I'm going in because I like that direction, and I really feel like sharing one of the more important stories that I've had happen to me in the past 2 weeks on the job, working in aberrant psychology and behaviorism. This was 3 days before Christmas. I get a call to go to a satellite emergency room. And what that is, it's an emergency room that it's apart from the main hospital, and it's more like a little gas station sized place with only, in this particular case, 12 usable rooms. And so this emergency room place, it was connected to a larger hospital system, but it was out in a certain area of the suburbs where I immediately get this feeling that if I go all the way out there, the type of clientele that I'm going to get is going to be quickly handled, and I will be back home, snuggling in bed in a matter of hours, because it's going to be stereotypically female between 13 and 17, and she will have just had a fight with her mother, and she will most likely have an evaluator in the room when I get there, so that most of the charting doesn't even really need to happen up, past that, except for if this person was going to be admitted to a different facility, admitted to the larger hospital that was connected to, or needs to be watched because they are awaiting transport or their mother ditched them. And those things don't often happen in the suburbs. What happens is everyone has a little talk, and by that time, this teenage girl realizes, I've made my point. I've scared everyone. It's time to backpedal and say that everything's okay. And then they get outpatient treatment and they get discharged right then. So that's my immediate stereotypical reaction when I'm going to any satellite suburb emergency room. But in particular, this place that I went. And when I got there, I was wrong on many of those counts. I was right about the age range. I was right about the stated reason why there was suicidal ideation. I was not correct about the amount of time that I would be there. And I was not correct about the sex of the person, the gender. I show up and I learned that this boy had just been in a psych facility for about 10 days. And at around noon that day, he had been released from that psych facility, and he and his family went to a Chinese food restaurant a little bit later, where some issues that the family were having came up at the restaurant, and a fight ensued right there in public, which led this boy to leave the restaurant and start picking at some wounds that he had that were, visible. It's a thing with teenagers and SI. So his mother had him picked up by the police and brought to this satellite emergency room because it was the closest place. And then prior to me arriving, the mother had some choice words with the nursing staff and was not very happy to be in this situation. And the nursing staff could tell that there was a boyfriend in the mix that was not gelling well with the kid. So I assume the watch of this kid for a while, and I'm thinking evaluator's going to get there, and everything's going to be fine, right? A couple hours pass. I'm still there with him, and I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe this is different because it's the Christmas week, and maybe his insurance has a different evaluator that's just not on duty, or they don't have every hour in the city covered, And then I turn on the football game with him, and I'm explaining the rules of the game to him because he's actually Malaysian, and Malaysian kids, turns out, they don't know the rules of football that well. And I was explaining downs and why those lines are projected onto the field, during NFL football. And I learned a lot about his life. Most interestingly, that he believed in science. That's the way he put it at first. And that his mother did not. And being from Malaysia, he was part of a Muslim family. Okay, so I took my sweater off, and I decided to edit a little thing that I said that I just cut out because privacy, it's an ethical thing. And I don't want anyone identified by my stories that are based on real life things. So I was a little emotional, and I dropped something I shouldn't, so I edited it out and took my sweater off. So, kid's Muslim, and his mother's not. Some of his family, they were still Muslim, his brothers, and so was his father. But his father had passed away earlier in the year, in February. And it was bringing up a lot of tension in his family that he did not believe in the Muslim faith, and he was not adhering to things like his mother wanted, and he was getting beat at home. And by beat, I mean like pow pow beat. And it was very saddening to see this kid make excuses for his mother and say, oh, well, she's from Malaysia and she's Muslim, and, what are you going to do to change her? She's from a foreign culture, And anytime I see an abuse victim making excuses for their abuser, it just saddens me, Especially children, thinking that they can understand why their parents would beat them like that. I'm sure there are parents in Malaysia that do not beat their kids the way this kid was being beaten. In fact, there are probably worse beatings, and probably parents in Malaysia that never beat their kids at all, just like we have here in America. You know, there's parents that span the gamut of what it can be. Um, but there was one thing that his mother, who was strictly adhering to Muslim culture, made him do that disturbed him to the point that he was there in an emergency room after being in a treatment facility for 10 days. This one thing had followed him in his mind, and it was haunting him. Like, literally haunting him. When his father died in past February, his mother did not let anyone touch his father's body. Instead, she kept it safe and then had my patient and his brothers wash their father's body ceremonially. And this kid had to hold his father's head when he was dead and look down upon it, upside down, while his brothers were washing the rest of his body so that the neck would not be broken. And the visage of his father was burned into his memory. And he was from the American culture more than the Malaysian culture, and it was really getting to him. His mother was thinking, this is one of those rites of passage that makes a Muslim a man. And instead, what it ended up doing was frightening him and angering him, because every time he saw something that his mother did wrong, he was reminded of his dead father's face staring back at him. His mother had a new man in her life, and when he thought about how he didn't like this person, he would see his father's dead face staring back at him. He thought that his mother had mismanaged his father's money. And every time any issue about that came up, he would see his father's dead face staring back at him. That's what was driving him nuts. That and a mother that beat her child. And when I was growing up, 30 years ago, I remember a church phrase in the Assembly of God church that my mother forced me to attend. And that phrase went, "But for the grace of God, there I go." And in this particular case, I was like, holy shit, I'm going to do this kid one better. Because that is where I was. I did feel that pain. And so, when I self-disclosed to him that I was pretty active in the non-religious circles in town and started telling him about some of the things that were available to him, such as we have the Secular Hub in Denver. We have different groups on meetup.com where he could go meet friends that would be supportive of him. He disclosed that he was actually an open atheist. And I began to speak with him about some of the heroes of atheism of late. I taught this kid, along with the rules of NFL football, who the four horsemen were. You know, I I wrote down on a little sticky pad a bunch of YouTubers that he should check out. And at the top of the list was the Gin and Tonic Show and Klingshore, because they were more from his background, and he'd probably enjoy them more. But a lot of people that actually might be watching this video, I was like, check these people out, you know? And on the back of that sticky pad, I was like, oh, and by the way, watch Cosmos, you know? I talked to him about a few other concepts throughout the night until he finally went to sleep. And I made sure that that sticky pad made it into his pocket in his personal effects, because when you have somebody on a watch for SI, they're dressed in a green gown and their personal effects are taken and placed somewhere else where security has them, so they can't get into anything. So I made sure it was in his pocket of his hoodie, so that wherever he ended up going, when he was finally seen, he'd have it. So in the middle of the night, his evaluator came. And she talked with him, and because of talking with me, he was able to discuss a lot more freely the abuse that he had received from his mother, and really articulate what was wrong. The evaluator decided, he's not done with treatment. That 10-day treatment that he had, it wasn't enough. He needed to go back in. And she was trying to approve a room for him, and he happened to have Medicaid. And Medicaid came back with the decision, no. He just finished treatment. He can't go right back in. It's too soon. We need to see if this was enough first. We need to send him back. And under the clause that the place where she would be sending him back to was not safe because he had an abusive mother, this evaluator decided to schedule him for another evaluation, which kept me at this satellite ER that I thought I'd only be at for 2 hours. It kept me there the entire night. And I was happy to be there. I would work that shift any day. The time that she was buying him by scheduling him for extra evaluations right there in that emergency room, even though the amenities of an emergency room are very slight and all he had was a TV to entertain himself with and pretty much crap food, box lunches, at least he wasn't getting beat, And the time that she was buying him was going to be enough time for CPS to get their asses down there and have a talk with his mother. And I don't know where it went from there yet, but this might be one of those stories that I get some closure on. Maybe a few of us will, because this fucker might seek us all out and hit the subscribe button a couple times, You'll know him if he does come. You'll know him.